What's happening, everybody? On today's show, what does the SEC pecking order look like with some post-spring game reactions? We will run through all 16 teams. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll run through post-spring game reactions and some post-spring rankings from Brad Crawford over at 24/7 Sports. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Admit it, you have a competitive side, and you should be a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Okay, we're going to get to Brad Crawford of 24/7 Sports SEC Power Rankings post-spring practice. But first, as you all know, the football spring transfer portal is closed. You had to submit your paperwork by yesterday in order to transfer to another school for this fall. As Matt Zenitz and others have mentioned, some schools could take a few days to process that portal paperwork. So there's still going to be more names popping up today, tomorrow, and all that kind of stuff. And then graduate transfers had an extra day. So still more names to come, but technically the portal window closed. So, but we'll still see more names entering the portal. Remember, you don't have to choose your destination school yet. You just had to put your name into the portal. So before we get to those post-spring rankings, let's hit the portal just a little bit. Here were some of the latest names to get into the portal yesterday. Alabama second-year safety Tony Mitchell has entered the transfer portal. He was a top 130 recruit just a year ago. Mitchell's the fourth Crimson Tide player to transfer in this spring window, and appeared in 7 games as a freshman at Alabama, recorded a tackle, but was dealing with a hamstring throughout this spring and did not appear in the A-Day game. So Mitchell becomes the fourth Alabama player to transfer following spring drills, along with Peyton Woodyard. Of course, they brought in Cameron Howard, the Charlotte transfer. That happened just the other day. And reports are Peyton Woodyard is going to go visit Oregon this weekend. We'll see if that's where he ends up. Meanwhile, Utah State running back Davon Booth, he has officially committed to Mississippi State. We told you guys earlier in the week that that might be one that Mississippi State would be eyeing. Booth rushed for 800 yards last season and 6 touchdowns, so a nice pickup in the backfield there for Mississippi State. A few other names. Texas linebacker Kendrick Blackshire has entered the portal. Remember, he was at Alabama in January. He transferred to Texas, and now here in April, May, he is transferring out of Texas. So didn't like what he saw in the spring. Ole Miss second-year running back Kedrick Rescano has entered the transfer portal, was a top 150 overall recruit last year. So that will leave Ole Miss with without a young running back in their backfield. They're going to have senior Ulysses Bentley. They're going to have the injured senior Logan Diggs, who transferred from LSU. Remember, Henry Parrish is returning back to Ole Miss from Miami. And then they were also bringing in New Mexico transfer Ja'Cory Croskett-Merritt. But, look, you'd like to have a couple of young guys on that roster, but looking like they're going to go with the older guys, the upperclassmen, to kind of maybe go running back by committee to replace the production of Quinshon Judkins from last year. Liberty left tackle transfer Chase Mitchell is taking a visit to Vanderbilt. He started every game for them last season, so see if he ends up at Vanderbilt. And then lastly, Arkansas transfer quarterback Jacoby Criswell heading back to North Carolina. He started his career with the Tar Heels, went to Arkansas, didn't get the job there. He's going back to North Carolina. So there you have it. That's the latest in the transfer portal. All right, let's get into it. The SEC Power Rankings following spring practice. And Brad Crawford, 24/7 Sports, does a fantastic job in covering college football as a whole, but also does a good job when he writes pieces about the SEC. And coming in at number 16, no surprise here, he's got the Vanderbilt Commodores. And a little bit of what Brad wrote, he said, there's no need to pile on. Clark Lee might have the toughest power conference job in the country, leading a Vanderbilt team, playing opponents with talent advantages every week throughout SEC play. That's why he is 2-22 in the SEC over the last 3 years. He's a bright football mind, took it upon himself this offseason to make wholesale changes to his staff, bringing in Tim Beck to call the offense. bringing in quarterback Diego Pavia, and will handle the defense on his own. Of course, he previously served as Notre Dame's DC before coming to Vanderbilt, so he knows what he's doing there. But very tough schedule once again. We'll see if Clark Lee can survive this year in Nashville. Coming in at number 15 in the post-spring power rankings, it is Mississippi State head coach Jeff Lebby. And we know he's promising an explosive offense in Starkville, but how much of that can we expect in year one? Like a lot of first-year coaches flipping a roster, Lebby went transfer portal hunting, and he brought in Louisville wideout Kevin Coleman, UTEP's Kelly Arkarai, and Baylor quarterback Blake Shapen. So a lot of new pieces. And I said it, watching their spring game, like there's some talent there. I think they're going to be able to score some points on some people. Now, defense, not so great, but maybe Lebby, if he calls the plays right, maybe Mississippi State upsets some people this year in the SEC. But I agree with Brad's ranking so far. 16 and 15, that's where it goes. All right, coming in number 14, he's got the Arkansas Razorbacks. It was a Brad Crawford writes. He says nearly half of the Razorbacks starting 22 will be transfers. Sam Pittman's seat will be scorching by November if Arkansas has not shown progress. Now, much of the team's stock is in Bobby Petrino and Boise transfer quarterback Taylon Green, along with some new faces at the back end of the defense. Arkansas let KJ Jefferson leave for UCF in the portal, and now Taylon Green will take over. The Razorbacks lost a couple of their best defenders to the NFL draft. They lose Rocket Sanders to the transfer portal. He ends up at South Carolina. I'm a little bit more bullish on Arkansas after what I saw in the spring. I get it. Like, this is probably where most people would have them, and I get why Brad's got them ranked here, but I liked what I saw from the Petrino offense with Taylon Green. They moved the ball, man. They scored some touchdowns in that spring game. They looked fluid. I like Jaquindon Jackson, the transfer running back. Like, Arkansas's got some pieces. I think they are going to be better than we expect. Now, again, can you weather the storm of a brutal SEC schedule? That's the big question. But I'm a little bit more optimistic on Arkansas. Stock rising in my mind for them. Now, maybe only a notch or two. We're not talking, top 6 team in the SEC, but like I said, I mean, is 7-5 doable? 6-6, an absolute minimum. Get to a bowl game, maybe win it. You go 7-6. It'd be an improvement for Sam Pittman. But does that get Arkansas fans excited? Well, look, if you're competitive in every game, right? Like if you're getting blown out in a couple of them, probably not. Coming in number 13, he has got the South Carolina Gamecocks. And this one is interesting because Brett Crawford writes, South Carolina is anxious to see if offensive line play improves with a number of key players along with several high-profile freshmen who are going to help. He said, that said, there's no clear-cut top wide receiver. You just had Juice Wells. You just had Xavier Legette. Legette's on to the NFL. Of course, Juice Wells down at Ole Miss. You have 5-star Nick Harbor, but he was focused on track throughout the spring preparation for the Olympics. And you got redshirt freshman quarterback Lenora Sellers taking over, but man, high expectations for him. And I just wonder, is that defense going to be more improved? And on the O-line and D-line, the trenches, that's where South Carolina has not been great these last couple of years. So big questions for South Carolina. I would probably flip these. I'd probably have South Carolina 14 and Arkansas 13. But again, we're picking hair, whatever, go either way there. All right, splitting hairs. That's what I was trying to think to say. All right, over coming in number 12. He's got the Kentucky Wildcats. Brett Crawford says Kentucky should be one of the SEC's fastest teams on offense with Berrien Brown and Dane Key back. You do lose running back Ray Davis to the NFL, but Mark Stoops is satisfied with trying to throw it downfield. Georgia quarterback transfer Brock Vandergriff coming in. Bush Hamden coming in as the OC. Strength of this Kentucky team should be at the line of scrimmage, where they got a bunch of veterans on both the O-line and D-line. I agree. I like the O-line for Kentucky. I think they were a little improved last year. I think they might even be a little bit better this year. So probably a good spot there for Kentucky. Now, if Brock Vandergriff is good, maybe slide him ahead of Florida. And that Kentucky-Florida game has been much more competitive in recent years. So I say that because he has got Florida coming in at number 11 on this list. Kentucky 12, Florida 11. And here's what he writes. So the Gators have one of the better quarterback rooms in the conference with Graham Mertz and the 5-star quarterback DJ Lagway behind him. You do lose Ricky Parasol to the draft, but Trey Wilson, rising sophomore wide receiver, in there to make a name for himself. And you lose Trevor Etienne. He heads off to Georgia. You lose Princely Umanmielen, who transfers to Ole Miss. And Florida's schedule is just so difficult this season. It could be a 6-win team and still be better than a team or two that finishes ahead of the Gators in the SEC. So Brett Crawford got the Gators at number 11. On into the top 10. He has got the Auburn Tigers coming in at number 10. He says, does Hugh Freeze have a difference maker at quarterback? Judging by spring practice, that answer is still up in the air. Tigers have not taken a quarterback in the transfer portal. Pretty surprising considering the up and down play last year by Peyton Thorne. He did not separate from Holden Gariner and Hank Brown during camp, but Freeze said this month the competition will extend into fall camp. For as much resources and effort the Tigers put into putting wide receivers around this position, you'd like to see more confidence in one of the possible QB1 options on the Plains. I agree. Hugh Freeze is banking this entire season on the success of Peyton Thorne. And Peyton Thorne, look, they said he's improved. You just got to hope he has, because that is a big, big risk for Hugh Freeze, putting this entire season on the line for Peyton Thorne. So we'll see what happens there. All right, that's we're into the top 10 now. So coming up next, we are going to hit on the rest of the post-spring practice rankings. This is from Brad Crawford over 24/7 Sports, but giving you our thoughts as well as we make it along the way. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel, and it is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. They've got all the action up there for you. I got buddies doing it every night. NBA playoffs going on. There's action literally every night you can get in on, and FanDuel's got it for you. Go visit them right now. FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get signed up. Make every playoff shot count even more. And then you can download that FanDuel app, log in with the login you set up at sign up, and they are FanDuel. They are America's #1 sports book. Go get signed up today. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Keep coming back, checking us out each and every day. And hey, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming on the Amazon Fire TV channels or on YouTube. All right, let's dive back into it as we are doing the post-spring practice rankings. Brad Crawford from 24/7 Sports going through his rankings and then kind of giving you our thoughts as we go along. And now we're up to number 9 in these rankings, and we stop off over in College Station as Mike Elko and Texas A&M Aggies, as Brad Crawford says, despite the coaching carousel resulting in a mass transfer exodus for A&M, Mike Elko and his staff worked overtime to fill positions throughout the portal, and A&M looks like a team capable of earning a spot in a preseason top 25. Connor Wegman could be a potential high draft pick at quarterback, while the Purdue transfer edge, Nick Scorton, was unblockable this spring. I've talked about how impressed I was throughout all the spring and even in the spring game. But he says they look the part, and they cover up a lot for the loss of Walter Nolan, LT Overton, and other pieces they lost. Former Florida linebacker Scooby Williams slides into a starting role on that defensive side. And I love Torian York on that linebacking core for A&M as well. I agree with him. I think the Aggies are kind of sneaky. That schedule sets up very well for them. And I think, 7-5, I think, is the bare minimum based on their schedule. I think 8-4 very much in play. It's probably where I'd kind of put the Aggies, but 9-3, if a few things fall their way, that would be a huge jump forward from where Jimbo Fisher had this team a year ago. All right, coming in at number 8 in the post-spring rankings on 24/7 Sports, it is the Oklahoma Sooners. And Brad Crawford says Oklahoma's offensive line is new. The Sooners' go-to wideout is Deion Burks. He's a transfer from Purdue. And there's simply an assumption that the 5-star quarterback, Jackson Arnold, is ready to handle the massive expectations as a first-year starting quarterback at OU. Now, once you get past those markers on offense, Oklahoma's defense should be its calling card. Danny Stutzman is back. Got a few other pieces in that secondary back. And that's where Brent Venables butters his bread and maybe what he'll be doing in his first season in the SEC. Schedule is too difficult, though, to assume a playoff spot right now. That's what Brad Crawford says. But I agree. I mean, this was a 10-win team last year. Kind of sneaky. We forget about that with Dylan Gabriel, who is now going to be Oregon's quarterback. But Jackson Arnold, it all comes down to him. If he performs well, this could be a 9-win team, maybe 10. I keep saying that late that game last week of the season, it's Oklahoma at LSU. I just keep saying, like, man, what if both those teams are 9-2 going into that game? The loser will finish 9-3, but the winner could potentially get into a playoff spot at 10-2. Just could be something fun to watch as the year goes along. Coming in at number 7 in the post-spring practice rankings, it's the Tennessee Volunteers. And Brad Crawford says it's always nice to have 2 of the top players in the SEC starting on each side of the football. And that's the situation Josh Heupel has with the Vols. Nico Iamaleava at quarterback and James Pierce, the disruptive edge on the defense. Tennessee could be making moves this year. The secondary could be worrisome. There's a lot of new faces back there. But he says a budding group of running backs to assist Nico and make things easy on him as a first-year starter could be the key. Yeah, again, Tennessee falls into this grouping of floor, probably 7-5. Ceiling, 10-2. All depends on how good Nico is. And I like Nico. I'm a big buyer into him. I love what we saw from him in the bowl game. That was against one of the best defenses in the country in Iowa. Used his legs, used that running ability, found the end zone a couple of times. So, and I love their receiving core. We've had a couple of talked to a couple of people along the way that believe that Tennessee's offense is going to pick up right where they left off, kind of more what they were under Hendon Hooker 2 years ago, not as much was what they were last year with Joe Milton. All right, coming in at number 6 on this list, it's the Missouri Tigers. And Brad Crawford says some teams crumble with more exposure while others thrive in the limelight. Which way will the Tigers head this fall under Eli Drinkwitz? Most starters on the offense return, including Brady Cook at quarterback, Luther Burden, the all-world receiver. They do have to replace Cody Schrader, but they bring in a couple transfers, including Marcus Carroll. 3 dependable defensive backs were all NFL draft picks this past weekend, and Drinkwitz loses his defense coordinator, Blake Baker, to LSU this offseason. That's the big thing. Like, Mizzou's schedule is, it's not tough, but I just wonder, you lose all those pieces. Do you take a step back? You can only go so much Brady Cook to Luther Burden, right? What made that work last year was the balance of the dominant run game with Cody Schrader and company. And if they can't do that, and Eli's done it every year. Don't get me wrong. He's had a bevy of different backs. Every year they've had a stud running back since he's been there. So, but if they aren't able to do that, that's where I could see a couple losses creeping up on them. So I'm with them. I think Mizzou right there at 6 is a good one, but would not shock me if by the end of the year we're talking about Mizzou as the 8th or 9th best team in the SEC record-wise. I'm wearing a Mizzou shirt today. Coming in at number 5, he's got the LSU Tigers. He said this should be a competitive, if not elite, team for Brian Kelly in his 3rd season at LSU. Remember, teams that typically, some of these LSU coaches in their 3rd year, Les Miles, Nick Saban, Coach O, it was either in their 3rd or 4th year as head coach that they were going to win a national championship. So don't want to put that pressure on Brian Kelly. Again, it's going to be harder with the college football playoff expanding to win one, but certainly easier to make the playoff if you're Brian Kelly. Now, he's got T. Daniel Jr. You get Harold Perkins back on a defense that was not good last year, but Matt House is gone. Blake Baker's in. Bo Davis is in. Corey Raymond is in. They should have they have the right coaching staff. The problem is, do they have the Jimmies and the Joes to get it done? That is the question. So we will see there with Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers. I think it's probably right. Garrett Nussmeier was very impressive throughout the spring. Kyron Lacey looks good at wide receiver. I think they're going to be fine there. That's just getting stops and forcing turnovers on defense. Can they do that? The hallmark of what LSU's defenses used to be. I don't know. Coming in at number 4, Brad Crawford's got Alabama. Says it's unlikely, or it's likely unsafe to doubt Alabama under Kalen DeBoer given his track record of success. But this pressure cooker is a bit different in the SEC. The Crimson Tide appear to be in great hands at quarterback despite losing Julian Say in Ohio State. and the loss of safety Caleb Downs to Ohio State as well. The offensive line should be a strength. The ground game will blossom with Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. A couple players Alabama staff should be excited about this fall. Washington transfer wideout Jeremy Bernard. I thought he had a really good spring, along with freshman defensive backs Jalen Mbakwe and Xavier Brown. So, Alabama, again, is the ultimate. Could they go 11-1? Could they go 12-0? It's doable, but this isn't Nick Saban anymore. Can Kalen DeBoer get it done with the pressures of the SEC? We will see. Coming in at number 3, he's got the Ole Miss Rebels. He says, on paper, this Ole Miss roster looks like a group with a playoff berth on the horizon. Lane Kiffin essentially drafted a new defense ahead of the 2024 season after seeing what Alabama and Georgia did to the Rebels up front. There's 6 starters on defense from the portal, including Walter Nolan, Uman Mielen, Chris Paul. Toss in a couple new running backs and Juice Wells at wide receiver with Jackson Dart back, Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins, and this group is loaded. If Quinshon Judkins had stayed, maybe Ole Miss would be even higher on this list. But yeah, based on their schedule, like if Ole Miss loses a couple games, it's because they shoot themselves in the foot, right? Like turnovers, not executing, settling for field goals when they should be scoring touchdowns. That's what would keep this Ole Miss team from going to the playoff. But 10-2, I think, is they're 4 just based on the schedule. 2 losses and you're in. You're into the playoff. Coming in at number 2, he's got the Texas Longhorns. He says Steve Sarkisian knew much of his skill talent was gone for the NFL draft. Put a plan in place for the Longhorns. They bring in Isaiah Bond from Alabama, among several others. They need a standout edge rusher. They go get Trey Moore from UTSA. He was the Group of 5 sack leader last year. Anthony Hill might be the nation's most athletic sophomore linebacker. And the Longhorns' first season in the SEC should be special with Quinn Ewers at quarterback. And, oh, by the way, that Arch Manning guy waiting in the wings. I've talked about, I think Texas is a little bit overrated. I think they're riding that wave of, yes, they made the playoff last year. I think Quinn Ewers is a little bit overrated. I think he's good. I don't think he's grandiose grand. But we shall see. I like Texas. Again, they're still very talented, but they lost a lot off that team from last year. And the schedule gets tougher in the SEC now. You know, some people are thinking 11-1, maybe 12-0 type season for Texas. I'm more in the 9-3, and if a couple things go wrong, 8-4 type year for Texas. But that's just me. And coming in at number 1, the undisputed team, the number 1 team in here is Georgia Bulldogs. He says, Crawford says, Georgia's a conference championship to win after seeing its unbeaten season nullified by Alabama in Atlanta. The nucleus of that team is back, but not everyone. Carson Beck at quarterback, 5 senior starters on defense, and the additions of Trevor Etienne, Miami wide receiver Colby Young, and Vanderbilt's London Humphreys makes this team formidable once again. Georgia's schedule is brutal, but no drop-off is expected under Kirby Smart, and I agree with him there. I think Georgia, great chance of going 12-0. I think that, ceiling's 12-0. I think the floor is 10-2. And, I keep bringing this up. We'll do a whole show on this coming up real soon, but I think there's a real possibility. We keep saying 10-2 get you in the playoff, right? What happens if we have 4 or 5 SEC teams that go 10-2 this year? It's certainly possible with the schedule. It allows for parity because you got teams that aren't playing other teams this year. You got 16 teams now. You're not playing everybody in the conference. It's just not possible. So, all right. Still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And we'll take a minute here, guys, to call game off. We got to hit pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. We mentioned them already, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get to. You got unique stickers that you could trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton included in their unique mini games like digging for treasure or the robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzy. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on the Google Play or App Store. It is Monopoly Go. Game on. All right, as we wrap up here on Locked On SEC, I want you guys to hear a little bit over my Houston radio show yesterday. We had on Mike Griffith of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Dawg Nation, to talk a little bit about some of the Georgia draft picks, and including Kamari Lassiter's thoughts on Carson Beck and a few other things. So you'll hear in this interview the voice of myself and my co-host on radio, Stan Norfleet, talking with Mike about a number of different topics. So here was a little bit of our conversation with Mike Griffith from yesterday.
How do we explain that, fellas? Why doesn't Georgia have guys as good in the secondary as they have everywhere else? Receiver, linemen, linebackers, edge defenders. What's going on in the secondary?
Well, a couple theories on that. I think, first of all, I think Lewis Cine is awful special, and if he hadn't broke his leg, he'd probably be an all-pro safety. Yeah, I think he's solid. So here's the way they look at it. When you play for a Saban or a Kirby or a Muschamp, you're going to get delayed, developed to the highest level while you're in college, because you're going to get where some of these other, that don't have that level of coaching or don't have that iron sharpens iron, they might have a little bit more ceiling in them that's left that hasn't been coached up yet. So I think maybe that's the perception. You're getting guys that have already been, they go to the league. It's not like they're going to learn some new technique. It's not like they're going to get coached up any better than they've already been. Now, the trade-off is you're getting an NFL-ready guy. This ain't a guy that's got to develop in your system for 1 or 2 years. This is a guy you're going to plug and play as a rookie.
Sure.
Because he's already played these complex defenses and he's already played that level of competition that he's going to see in the league. So it's a split there, Stan. I mean, I know what you're saying. That's why I said to you, I didn't think that, Kamari was necessarily a high ceiling guy in terms of, I don't think he's going to, necessarily blossom into a, multiple all-pro, but I think this is a guy that you're going to plug in that's solid. And I could be wrong. I mean, he might have more gas left in the tank. Let me tell you, I didn't think C.J. Stroud would do what he did. I thought I really didn't. I mean, this guy, I'm so excited for him. I'm so happy for him because when they played at Georgia, this guy played his ass off, man. He outplayed Georgia. I mean, C.J. Stroud was amazing in that game. And the question was, why haven't we seen this all along? And what you got there for a coach in Houston and what happened with that franchise and all the excitement, I mean, golly, I just never saw that coming. And this is a guy that never won anything in the Big Ten and didn't win the title and didn't beat Michigan. And his personal history. And this cat's turned into one of the most exciting superstars in the game. Who knows who that's going to happen for? I mean, you played the game. You never know. But what you know about this guy is high character, well-coached, solid, not going to disappoint you in the workouts, not going to disappoint you with his assignments. And so, I mean, I think the Texans coaching staff feels like they can help him take the next step and get what they want out of him.
Mike, one last one for you real quick. I love how everybody always does the early mock drafts for next year, but we're already seeing Carson Beck highly thought of as probably the best quarterback in next year's draft. Him, Quinn Ewers, a few others. But how good is Carson Beck right now?
Well, he solves Rubik's Cube in under a minute. So, you got a high processor here that goes to the line. I'm serious now. I'm not kidding you. I can't believe the guy doesn't have an NIL deal with Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, come on.
Seriously. Right? I mean, like, hey, kids, buy this and be a good quarterback, right? People would buy that. I'm trying to help them out here.
Maybe they don't advertise anymore, right?
Right? I'm just saying, I need a cut of this. This is my idea. But no, the guy's an incredibly fast processor. He's got an NFL arm. He's got good athleticism. He waited his time. I mean, he's driving a Lamborghini. I say he deserves it. The guy sat on the bench for 3 years. He could have transferred anywhere and played. That's what I've said. He's the most talented Georgia quarterback since Stafford, okay? I mean, the guy has got a golden arm and all that. We know that he's a talented quarterback. What we don't know about Carson, is he a championship quarterback? And you could have said the same thing about Stafford, by the way, until he went to the Rams, right? So we're going to find out if Carson grows in that assertive, charismatic. I mean, really, I'm getting picky, but in terms of what he does athletically with the football in his hands, his ability to read, his ability to deliver the ball, decent mobility, could get a little bit better this year. I mean, this guy could be a franchise quarterback, but can he be a championship quarterback? Last year when they played Alabama in the SEC championship game, he got outplayed by Jalen Milroe. It's probably the only game that I'd say Jalen Milroe outplayed him in. That's another guy I look at. This is a high ceiling guy to me. High risk, high reward kind of guy. Can Jalen Milroe maybe be the one? Is it going to be Carson Beck? I don't know. These guys they're both really good. Quinn Ewers, you go back and look at that Alabama game tape. This guy played the game of his life against Alabama to beat the Tide in Tuscaloosa. Is he going to get consistent enough? I mean, could somebody else rise from the pack? I wonder about Carson. We're going to find out, though, because he's got some weapons. He's got an offensive line. And I think he'll go into the season as probably one of the Heisman Trophy favorites, as well as, like you said, a guy that's on the radar as a potential one. He could have come out this year and been the fourth quarterback taken. He got, $18 million? He negotiated about a $4 million deal to stay at Georgia and bet on himself. If he comes out next year and he's 1 or 2, he'll make about $30 million. So high stakes, high rewards with Carson.
Our thanks again to Mike Griffith there of Dog Nation. Before we call the show, a couple of basketball transfer nuggets coming out yesterday. FAU transfer guard John L. Davis has committed to Arkansas. Davis, the number 1 player in the on-3 transfer portal rankings. He averaged 18 points per game last season at FAU. Big get there for John Calipari and Arkansas as they continue to crush. Look, getting talent was never John Calipari's issue. He always had talent. Said he underachieved with that talent with Kentucky. See what he does at Arkansas. And then the other big tidbit yesterday, Oklahoma State transfer center Brandon Garrison, a former McDonald's All-American, committed to Kentucky and Mark Pope. So we'll see what he is able to do. All right, there you have it. This is the latest going on around the SEC. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Come back tomorrow on the show. And for your second listen, check out Locked On, has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's available on the Amazon Fire TV and free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today. Go look for it, covering all the top sports stories of the day for you 24/7. Locked On Sports Today. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Come on back.